Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Grotto in the Tar Pit. Biblical Moses is one of the most important and controversial figures of the whole Bible, thought to have written the first 5 books of it, as well as leading the Israelites out of bondage from Egypt. But there are theologians and even biblical scholars today that believe he never existed. We're going to try to prove that wrong today with our special guest, Christopher Eames. How you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much too. I kind of just wanted to. I usually get to know my guests a little bit, but because of the subject, I'm really excited about it. So I'd like to just kind of jump into it if that's okay with you.
Yep, that's fine by me.
So I kind of want to set up everything, as quickly as possible, or whatever it takes to set up how Moses got there. So I was going to ask a little bit about Joseph. Would you be able to take those questions?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so I wanted to know who were the pharaohs who ruled during the time of Joseph?
Okay, so like you said, very controversial subjects. There's a lot of different theories as to who was who, which was this or that pharaoh, this kind of thing. And this is actually one of the reasons why I think we can have good confidence in the Torah, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible being attributed to Moses, or at least that time period of writing. One of the reasons is because the pharaohs are not named. Now, it drives people crazy, like trying to figure out who this or that pharaoh is. But the pharaohs aren't named within that block of scripture. We do have them start to be named later on, namely from the 10th century BC onwards. You hear about Pharaoh Shishak, you hear about some of these others, Tarkaha, but not earlier. And this actually fits with a really unique window, which is the second half of the second millennium BC. So basically, we're talking 1550 onwards to the 10th century BC, in which the pharaoh's title was more practically used by itself, and the pharaoh wasn't referred to by his regnal name. So this actually, far from it being like an idea of a late writer who didn't really know what he's talking about, the fact that the pharaohs within this block of scripture aren't named actually fits with standard practice for this specific point in time. So it's frustrating for us trying to figure out who is who throughout the Torah, but it fits well with a Mosaic author working at that time, penning this down. Okay, so when it comes to the time of Joseph, we get into some controversies because if we look back at that time period, we have to take into account the Exodus period and then the sojourn period as well. But more generally, this period of time fits into what is known as the second intermediate period in Egyptian history. So Egyptian history is divided up into these big blocks of like unified kingdom periods, and then these in-between periods where things are a little bit more chaotic, things are a little bit more decentralized. So you would have the Old Kingdom period, which is on the scene in the mid 3rd millennium BC. Then you would have the first intermediate period. Then you would have the Middle Kingdom period, which is like from 2000 BC on for a few centuries. And then you have the second intermediate period. And then you get into the New Kingdom period, which is like these super powerful pharaohs. This is our Exodus period. No matter what really Exodus position you take, if you take the early date like I do or the late date, in any case, that's New Kingdom period. It's that time period just before, which is the one that fits nicely with the Joseph account. This is the second intermediate period. It depends on how you date this period. There's not as much known about these intermediate periods as there are about the more royal, solidified kingdom periods. But this would put us within the mid first half of the second millennium BC. This is the time period of Joseph. And this period is famous for the Hyksos. And the Hyksos came to rule the northern part of Egypt. Think the Delta area, think the land of Goshen, while the native pharaohs, the native Egyptians, ruled in southern Egypt from Thebes. So you
And
have
the Hyksos were Semitic, right? Possibly
yes, that's right.
relatives of the Israelites, right?
That's right. That's what I believe. So there are some who don't agree with that, but either way, we're talking about immigrants from the land of Canaan, from the Levant. These are the Hyksos that come in to northern Egypt, who settle around this delta area, this land of Goshen area, who become established in this area and have this sort of rule that's going on simultaneously.
That would
with
be
the
the 14th and the 15th dynasty, right?
Yes.
And
Yes. So yeah.
yeah, around what time is that?
So we're talking around 1700 BC, a little bit before for some of these earlier dynasties, and I would place the key member of the Hyksos as arriving. This is Silitis, talked about by Manetho, the historian, the 3rd century BC Greek historian. Put him coming on the scene around 665, around this time frame, plus or minus a few years. So I see that as the biblical Joseph. I think a good case can be made for Silitis being Joseph. Manetho, the historian, no friend of the Israelites at all. You read some of his accounts and they're quite anti-Semitic, in fact. But what they do show is this core historicity to the events happening in Egypt at the time. And he mentions this leader of the Hyksos called Silitis being the first one to come in and gather corn, which is interesting in the account, the biblical account of Joseph and his family coming into Egypt and gathering corn. There's actually a verse that specifically references corn. And then everyone's familiar with the biblical account of storing all these foodstuffs. But the name Silitis actually fits really well with Joseph, because there's a title for Joseph in Genesis calling him Joseph the Salit, which is translated as governor. And it's not a more common term used for governor elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible. This is like a special word, Joseph the Salit, S-A-L-I-T. So Salitis, S-A-L-I-T-I-S, it's got that common Greek masculine ending on the end. It's a great fit in terms of the title of the guy, in terms of what he's doing in the land.
So since we're on that subject about title, is there any actual connection of him being Imhotep? I know that's a common theory.
Yeah, I don't think so personally. There's some theories out there of Joseph, the Pharaoh Joseph of the 3rd millennium BC, and Imhotep the physician, and kind of melding them into the 2nd century BC period as maybe referring to one and the same individual. I think there's just a bit too much gymnastics for that to take place. But again, that's my theory. That's my opinion. So standard Egyptian chronology would put him on the scene and Joseph on the scene in the 3rd millennium BC, in the mid 3rd millennium. But Imhotep definitely became lionized in later periods. Perhaps there was some kind of synthesis with other figures and kind of attributing certain deeds one way or another. But he was a famous physician that came to be worshipped even for his deeds. So it's possible that there was cross contamination of stories, shall we say, and different deeds applied to this figure that might have been best been applied to Joseph or someone like that.
Okay, sorry to knock you off your train of thought, but you were
Oh.
the Hyksos.
Hit me.
Oh yeah, you were talking about the Hyksos.
Yeah, so the standard Egyptian narrative is that these were an evil people that came in and that conquered territory and that were pillaging and burning their way through the land. More recent scholarship has called into question some of these biased accounts. And actually, from the archaeological research, it seems like the Hyksos came in peaceably, came in gradually, and became established in the land. It seems like there was even some kind of symbiosis going on at the time between the native Egyptians and the Hyksos rulers, and gradually each entity kind of kept growing in power, and things eventually reached a climax in the decades following, and that's what you have with the eventual wars that broke out, and then this turn toward the New Kingdom period, when you have a native ruler from Thebes rising up, basically saying what you have in Exodus 1, attributed to the Israelites, like, these people have become too great and too many, let us rise up and overthrow them lest they overthrow us, effectively. So you do see that coming to a head on into the 16th century BC, that following century.
Yeah, one of the things that I've heard is that they kicked out the Hyksos, but they couldn't kick out the Israelites because they had a contract. Basically, the previous Pharaoh had made a contract with Joseph and his family, saying, you know, they're allotted this land, so they couldn't actually break that contract, and that's why Israel remained, but the Hyksos were kicked out. Is that what you believe?
Yeah, not quite. There's second intermediate period is kind of a blurry period. Like, even the succession of pharaohs for the native Egypt, people can't agree on that. Like, it's a more obscure period. There's a lot of intentional obscuring by later Egyptians of some of the details of this period. At least the general picture that we get fits really well with this Joseph account and the account of his family moving in. I see the Israelites as part of a core component of the Hyksos, including the Hyksos ruler Jacob Har, or Jacob Har. I see that as fitting well with Jacob himself, as well as Shemken, possibly being Shimon, Simeon, the one of the brothers. Sakir Har being Issachar, another of the brothers. So I see the Israelites as part of at least a core component of the Hyksos themselves. Now, when it comes to the Hyksos being expelled, that's generally taken to be around 1550 BC and attributed to Ahmose the First, who is the founder of New Kingdom period Egypt. One of the chief, probably the chief scholar on the Hyksos is Manfred Bitak. He is the chief excavator of Avaris. This is the capital of the Hyksos. And he actually disagrees with this model, that this kind of overly simplistic story that Ahmose came into power and then kicked out the Hyksos and they went straight into Canaan. So this kind of more simplistic model, this is more seen by ultra early Exodus proponents as putting the Exodus at that time in the mid 16th century BC, around 1550. I'm a 15th century proponent, which is the century following, and following with Manfred Bitak's interpretation, he doesn't see the Hyksos as being wholesale kicked out at this point. He sees Ahmose as overthrowing them, but it seems like they're remaining in the land. Maybe some are somehow driven out, but even in some of the classical historical accounts, like from Manetho and from Pharamond, it seems like they only go so far. It's like they don't go all the way to like Pelusium or somewhere like that. And Bitak sees this Semitic entity as remaining in the land. So it depends on whom you talk to. If you think that all the Hyksos and everyone is driven out at that point in time, or just the Hyksos, and like you say, and then the rest of the Semitic population stays there, or the Hyksos / Semitic population all stay there, but they just have a new overlord. Like they become part of the United Kingdom of Egypt at that point in time, which I think fits the best. And then moving into the 15th century, you do see an abandonment of the Hyksos royal area around the time of Amenhotep II, Thutmose the fourth, which is where I would place the Exodus personally. So again, it depends on who you talk to. But at least the general sweep of things, we have the general picture of Joseph and that account coming into Egypt peaceably, things reaching ahead, and then a pharaoh coming along who knew not Joseph, whom I believe is Pharaoh Kamose, issuing this decree. Ultimately, it's his brother Ahmose I who finally succeeds in completely overthrowing. And then you have a period of domination, enslavement, and on with the story from there.
So before we actually get to that point, I did have a few other questions. I wanted to ask, in your opinion, is Goshen the city of Avaris?
Yeah, Goshen is would include the city of Avaris in it. So Goshen is more like the broader territory of the Nile Delta, or more specifically centered east of the Nile Delta. So Avaris is one of the many cities that are located there.
And apparently there was a discovery there of a building built in a Semitic fashion. They could have contained the graves of the patriarchs. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I think is it David Roll that's done a fair bit of talking about
I
that.
know.
Yeah, with 12 graves, is
Mhm.
it something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's again, all of these things are hotly debated.
Okay.
Our period we specialize in here is the Iron Age, which is many centuries later, and even that is debated in some ways to even a greater degree. So everyone's got their own theories and debates, but I do like that theory that there is a connection there within the royal precinct, and that possibly that statue fragment that was found there,
With the
which
multicolored coat.
yeah, exactly, with the mushroom
Yeah,
hairdo type
mushroom head.
thing,
Yeah.
typical Semitic hairdo. I think that's a really interesting proposition, and could well be could well be Joseph.
So now that we got it established that Joseph was probably there, there's evidence.
Mhm.
How long do you think the Israelites were actually slaves for?
Good question. I think about a century, personally.
They weren't slaves the whole 400 years. It was just like
No,
afterwards.
no. And I don't think anyone really holds to that. Like this gets into what's known as the long sojourn versus short sojourn debate. So you have the late Exodus versus early Exodus debate, like was it 15th century Exodus versus 13th century? But then behind that, packing that out, is the debate about the sojourn length in Egypt. Was it short sojourn, which I believe to be the case and think fits best with the 1660s arrival of this specific Hyksos dynasty? Or do you take the long sojourn, which puts it earlier again in the 19th century? Or, sorry, I mean 17th century for the short sojourn, 19th century for the long sojourn. In any case, no one on either camp really zeroes in on the whole lot being like 400 years of enslavement. If you read, I believe it's Genesis 15, which just discusses that, it talks about several things as happening within that 400-year period. And so part of it, including that enslavement. So I don't think the full 400 years was in enslavement. Certain oppressions, sure, back and forth, but not full-on enslavement for the whole period. I would see that primarily as being that century-long block up until the Exodus.
Okay. So who did you say was the pharaoh who ordered them to be slaves, or that you think ordered them?
So that being Ahmose the First, so he's the founder of the New Kingdom period. He started several projects, building projects, which fits well with the account in Exodus 1 of some of the projects being described there. I see the Pharaoh who knew not Joseph as being his brother, who initiated this campaign, and who said on his Carnarvon tablet some statements that are very similar to what we read in Exodus 1. A lot of people think Ahmose the first is the Pharaoh who knew not Joseph and also started this enslavement.
So there's
I
some
think,
artifacts of inscribing what this pharaoh said, and it's similar to that.
yes, that's right, the Carnarvon tablet.
The Carnarvon
So,
tablet. Okay.
Carnarvon tablet. It's named after, I think it was a sponsor of the excavations in which this wooden tablet was found.
Where was that found at?
I forget exactly. I think I can look it up here in just a second.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'd never heard of that before. That's
Yeah, well, let me bring it up because then I can read a little bit from the text. It's quite dramatic. So if we look at the, here we go. If we look at the Exodus 1 text, like the key text here, Exodus 1 verse 8, now there arose a new king over Egypt who knew not Joseph, and he said unto his people, so here we have a speech before his people, a royal speech, quote, behold, the people of the children of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there befalleth us any war, they also join themselves unto our enemies and fight against us and get them up out of the land. Okay, so this reads very similar to the Carnarvon tablet. So it's named after the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. That's it. And it was found in 1908 in the vicinity of Deir el-Bahari. So this big mortuary complex. And this is some of the speech here on this tablet, speech from Ahmose to some of his advisors. And he's saying, His Majesty spoke in his palace to the council of nobles who were in his retinue. Let me understand what this strength of mine is for. So imagine he's down in Thebes issuing the speech. One prince is in Avaris, the Hyksos capital, and another is in Ethiopia or Nubia, Kush in the south. So Egypt's kind of divided up. You've got the natives there in the southern Egypt, and then you've got the Hyksos in the north, the Nubians in the south. So he's saying, let me understand what the strength of mine is for. One prince is in Avaris, another is in Ethiopia, and here I sit associated with an Asiatic, the Hyksos, and a Nubian. Each man has his slice of Egypt, dividing up the land with me. I cannot pass by him as far as Memphis in northern Egypt, the waters of Egypt. But behold, he has Hermopolis. No man can settle down, being despoiled by the imposts of the Asiatics, the Hyksos, Asiatics being another word for Hyksos. I will grapple with him, so I may cut open his belly. My wish is to save Egypt and to smite the Asiatics. So that's his little speech there. And then his counselors actually protest against him. They say, and the tablet continues, quote, behold, it is Asiatic water as far as Kusay, and they have pulled out their tongues that they might speak all together, so they're going out of their way to be able to communicate. Whereas we are at ease in our part of Egypt. Elephantine is strong, and the middle of the land is with us as far as Kusay. The sleekest of the Hyksos fields, are plowed for us, and our cattle are pastured in the delta. Emmer is sent for our pigs. Our cattle have not been taken away. He holds the land of the Asiatics, we hold Egypt. Should someone come and act against us, then we shall act against him. So these counselors are saying, no, you don't need to upset the status quo. Like, if anything,
there, we're down here.
This is like a great symbiosis here, where they're doing stuff for us, we're getting benefit from them. And so in any case, Ahmose rejects these protests of his counselors and ends up starting a war with the Hyksos. He is killed during that period of time. And then his brother, Ahmose I, is the one who takes over partway ends up finally subduing the north of Egypt, bringing it into part of this collective New Kingdom period, and then going from there. So I think that Carnarvon tablet really is amazing in light of this passage in Exodus 1 verses 8 to 10. I think Exodus 1 verse 8 to 10 is like a summary, it's like briefest summary of the speech of Carmos that was given.
No, I might have misheard you, but did he refer to them as the revenue in the beginning?
As the what?
Revenue? I might have
No,
misheard you.
yeah, I think so. To the Hyksos says that?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
that might have been something else.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I
Yeah.
misheard you. Yeah, that's just interesting. I'd never heard of that.
Yeah, one of
So
the most remarkable artifacts, I think, from that relating to that period of time.
okay. So who was the pharaoh who ordered the death of the Hebrew baby boys?
Okay, so here we get into chronological discussions, kind of tricky chronological discussions, because within all of these debates about early Exodus, late Exodus, long sojourn, short sojourn, we also have different Egyptian chronologies. We have high chronology, we've got middle chronology, we've got low chronology, we've got new chronology. So
A lot of
all these
chronology.
things, all these, yeah, ultra low chronology, and everyone is convinced that their chronology is right.
Yeah.
Like the amount of emails I've gotten from people saying it's absolutely this one, and these are the reasons why, and you're crazy to think otherwise. Like this is the way it just goes. So I'm in favor of high chronology personally. I think you can go with either high or low chronology. I would say low chronology is most popular in just giving dates for pharaohs. Like if you type into Wikipedia or wherever online, it'll typically give you the low chronology dates. So those are more in vogue at the moment. I personally prefer the high chronology. I think it fits best with the Masoretic text, especially the information in 1 Kings 6 verse 1. There is a variant though in the Septuagint, which would actually fit with low chronology. So in my mind, the word that comes to mind is halas, like forget about it, don't bother. Spent too much time in an Arab village today. But either or, like if you pick the high chronology with the Masoretic text, the low chronology with the Septuagint, you can get within the same kind of ballpark. And so I would put Thutmose I as the pharaoh responsible for killing the firstborn, putting him on the scene under a high chronology framework in 1526 BC. And this being the time in which I think Moses is born. Again, on an early Exodus framework with a high Egyptian chronology. Taking the low would just shift everything down. So I think Thutmose I. What's really interesting is Thutmose II. So we don't know relating to Thutmose I, but we know this practice was actually done at the time of Thutmose II, and probably more generally as well. So Thutmose II was the son of Thutmose I. So at least as a general practice, this killing of even infant children was done. Thutmose II specifically talks about a campaign into Nubia, Ethiopia, in which he orders everyone, including the young males, to be killed, save for one prince to be brought back from the battle into his palace. So it's kind of like exactly the same picture in which you've got widespread killing of male children right down to infants, and a prince ending up being spared and brought into the palace.
Yeah, there's two things that I got out of that. Like the first, I mean, I can't understand why people don't make the connection there that there's a Thutmoses and there's a Moses. Like there's a direct correlation with the name. I can't see why people don't see a connection there, first of all. And second, I wanted to ask you, where is that evidence where we can see that Thutmose II was ordering the deaths of infants?
Boy, you're really digging deep.
This is interesting. I mean, I
Yeah.
love the proof of the Bible that we can actually see a parallel in actual history.
Let me see if I can find the name of this inscription. Let's see. Not sure if I'll be able to find it super quickly. Yeah, the Aswan inscription. There it is.
That's one.
So I can actually quote from it here.
Okay.
So the Aswan inscription. So this is from the first year of Thutmose II's reign, and some people see him as the pharaoh within which the firstborn were killed.
Well, there would have been a co-regency with Thutmose I as well, right?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, again, it's a point of debate. Whatever the case, we are within like years, singular. So plus minus. So whether or not it happened right at this time or on either side, it's like plus minus 5, 10 years. So it's negligible, and it shows this kind of thing going on. Okay, the Aswan inscription records the following about his southern campaign against who he calls the vile Kush, this kingdom of Kush or Nubia to the south, Ethiopia, in other words. He says, quote, "As I live, as Ra loves me, as my father, Lord of the gods, praises me, I will not leave a male alive. This army of his majesty overthrew these foreigners. They took the life of every male according to all that his majesty commanded, excepting that one of those children of the prince of Kush was brought alive as a live prisoner with their household to his majesty." So, like widespread killing of males, excepting one male child. So then the inference from that is there were other male children that were also killed as part of this androcide, as part of this killing of
Wow.
males.
Wow.
So,
Well, what was that particular evidence found?
good question. I'm not. I would say S1, but who knows with some of these inscriptions. I think Sahel Island, possibly in the Nile, in southern Egypt, in any case. Yeah. Yeah, I would have to get back to you on that. But Aswan, I would say, in southern Egypt.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask the question, and I'm gonna step back and let you have at it. So, who was biblical Moses, and what evidence
Okay.
do we have for him in the Egyptian record?
Okay. So last year I wrote an article, "Is This Moses?" In which I posited that Senenmut, the Senenmut from history is one and the same as the biblical Moses. So it's a bit daring, I guess, to go out there and propose like someone as Moses. Like I think he started out with, he's this almost larger than life figure, so highly revered, so controversial. And it's like to tie him to this individual and to propose them as one and the same. It's a big thing. So, but I think there is good reason to believe these are one and the same individual. This isn't my original idea or anything like that. I've got a book that I read, I think in 2020 for the first time. This book here, The Exodus Reality, co-authored by Scott Roberts and Dr. John Richard Ward, in which it's kind of a different book in which each have their own theories, and it's kind of going back and forth from chapter to chapter about who thinks what about this or that. Scott Roberts proposes that Senenmut is one and the same as Moses, and he's so sure of it. He's like, boom, period. This guy is none other than the biblical Moses. And he follows the same kind of framework. Exodus in the 15th century, 1526 birth date for Moses, and then 1446 Exodus, and then 1406 entry into the Promised Land. Okay, so he proposes Senenmut as Moses. Another guy who proposes this is Antonio Crasto. He's got some different chronological ideas. He writes in Italian. He's Italian. He's got some Italian language articles. He proposes Senenmut as Moses. Basically, what you have in Senenmut is a rags to riches to disappearance story. And that's where it kind of ends as far as Senenmut goes. And on a high chronology framework, it fits like to the year with where you would expect Moses to be. So this high chronology framework, so just to lay some groundwork here, the building of Solomon's temple is widely held to be 967 BC, based on various factors, and we can get into them. But that's like the core date. And different theories are plus or minus a few years. In any case, 967 BC. 1 Kings 6 verse 1 says that he started building the temple in the 480th year after the Exodus. So that means that would place the Exodus in 1446 BC. So in the 480th year means 479 full years. That would place the Exodus 1446 BC. In numerous scriptures, you've got the breakdown of Moses's life into 40-year increments. So you have 40 years, about 40 years as prince in Egypt, 40 years in Midian, 40 years wilderness sojourn. So that means if you have a 1446 Exodus, that means Moses is born 1526 and Israel enters the Promised Land 1406. Okay, so on a high chronology framework, that puts Moses' birth right at the start of Thutmose I's reign in 1526. You have Hatshepsut come along. She is this great Pharaoh's daughter figure. Many people identify her as the Pharaoh's daughter of Exodus chapter 2, Hatshepsut.
And that would
On a
be
high
the one who pulled
chronology
them out of the
framework,
river, right?
yes, that's right. That's exactly right. So she is a fully royal daughter of Thutmose I, fully royal from his top wife, his main royal wife. The problem is Thutmose I had only a half royal son, Thutmose II, born from a secondary wife. So he arranged a marriage, Thutmose I did, between Hatshepsut, his fully royal daughter, and Thutmose II, his half royal son, to give Thutmose II greater legitimacy. Okay, so you have this pair. Hatshepsut does not bear a male heir for Thutmose II. Thutmose II is a sickly pharaoh. He may have reigned as few as 3 years, up to as many as 12 years. In any case, Hatshepsut doesn't end up bearing him a son and an heir. She does bear him a daughter, not a son though. Thutmose II bears an heir, Thutmose III, through a secondary wife. Iset, I think, is her name. So this union brings Thutmose III along. Okay, by the time Thutmose II dies, which
Do we know what he died from at all?
I don't. I just know that he's a sickly pharaoh. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that is known. There's probably something out there about it, or speculating at least. In any case, Thutmose III is only 2 years old when his father dies. So Hatshepsut begins a co-regency with Thutmose III until he's old enough to take over. I think it's a 22 or 24 year co-regency. So on a high chronology framework, this starts in 1504 BC. So during Hatshepsut's reign, we see this commoner known as Senenmut or Senmut raised to the highest ranks in the whole of Egypt. Like this guy he goes from a nobody, his father who predeceased him and predeceased his being raised in rank, he was given a really poor, lowly burial. And then there's something that goes on between Hatshepsut and Senenmut, in which she starts raising him right through the ranks till he's become what one Egyptologist identifies as the ruler of Egypt. Like this Egyptologist sees Senenmut as the de facto ruler of all of Egypt. Like that's how high in rank he's raised. He's given 90 different titles, like royal prince, overseer of the granaries, overseer of the priests, overseer of this, that, the other thing, left, right, and center. 90 different titles. It might be a little over 90, actually. And so you have these Egyptologists writing about him, just a remarkable guy. And they're like, there's no way he could have fulfilled a fraction of these job descriptions or these job titles. But for whatever reason, Hatshepsut is just giving him all these perks and privileges. And I think his name, Senenmut, is one of them. Senenmut has been taken to mean mother's brother. Mother's brother. And the likelihood is that this is a name that was given to him to give him some kind of divine legitimacy. So if he was just a commoner from pastoral parents, as they're sometimes described, lowly pastoral parents, if he's just a commoner, he needs some kind of new name to be able to elevate himself within the courts of Egypt and be able to associate with these demigods that are the Egyptian royal family. So he takes on this name, mother's brother, Senenmut. So
up to this time and even after, all Egyptian royalty were thought to be avatars of the gods, right?
Yeah, and it's remarkable because one of the titles he takes on is royal tutor to the pharaoh's daughter. So I said that Hatshepsut didn't bear a male child, which is interesting in and of itself because that would fit well with Exodus 2 and the desire to adopt a male child. In any case, she did have a daughter called Neferure. And so Senenmut ends up becoming this royal tutor to Neferure. And there are several statues of Senenmut seated with this princess on his lap. And this is just unheard of. Like, no commoner can be depicted touching a member of the royal family, the Egyptian royal family, number one. And number two, like any depictions, the royal family member has to be larger than the commoner. But in these depictions, you've got this big Senenmut and you've got this Neferure just seated tiny little on his lap. Kind of Senenmut is hugging her in a sense. So it's a really remarkable depictions, like without real parallel to this going on. So he's provided all of these privileges by Hatshepsut. And then during year 1819 of the co-regency, you have him disappearing. The last known reference is from that time, year 1819 of her reign. And so if you have her reign, the co-regency starting in 1504, 19 years later is 1486, 1485, that time period. So again, back to our time periods, overlaying Moses's life. If 1446 is the Exodus, so 40 years earlier would be 1486 when Moses disappears to Midian. So here we have this guy, Senenmut. He comes from nowhere, just the bottom of the rungs, gets just accelerated under Hatshepsut's reign to the highest levels of power, like insane titles given to him, honors bestowed upon him. And then 1486, he's gone. Like, where? This is the big mystery. Like, what happened to Senenmut? Where did he go? Now, we do have a twin tomb complex dedicated to Senenmut. But this is part of the mystery, is that he was never buried in there, and it was never fully finished. Like, this twin tomb complex was closed up, half finished, like still with the chips, workman's chips left in the rooms, still with tools laid out in the rooms. In one of them, there's
Like while they were building it, they just abandoned it. Like, no, we're not
abandoned
gonna
it
finish it.
midstream. Yep, didn't even finish it. And then there's another angle. So one of the famous things about Hatshepsut is that her reign was subjected later on, during the time of Amenhotep II, to what's known as damnatio memoriae, damnation of memory. And so widespread destruction of her reign, excising references to her name, demolishing things related to her. So this happened to Hatshepsut, and it happened to Senenmut,
Wow.
this damnatio memoriae practice. So they didn't finish his burial complex, and then someone much later on came along and destroyed a bunch of stuff related to him. I mean, some stuff does still remain, like some of these statues, same as it does for Hatshepsut, but there is evidence of widespread attempts at erasing his reign. So it's like you have all these elements coming together that fit so well with the idea of Hatshepsut as the pharaoh's daughter, taking this this boy, propelling him to the greatest heights in the kingdom as a prince of Egypt. And you know, there's more elements as well, because one of the chief titles of Senenmut is as royal architect, and he's credited with building the big or overseeing at least the mortuary complex in Deir el-Bahari of Hatshepsut. And this kind of fits well with some of the scriptures about Moses as well. Like, of course, you've got the building of the tabernacle and these other projects. Also, there's a building of a big pillared complex in the wilderness. I think Exodus 24 talks about this, erecting these pillars and building this place of witness. And then also in the account before Moses kills the workman and is driven off, like, you have the question, what is he doing at this work site? Why is he kind of interacting on this level at this work site? Could it be
kind of like God was getting him ready for what,
Yeah.
being able to explain this later on?
Yeah, so it would make sense if he had some kind of title of royal architect, if he was in this position to where he would find himself in this situation and then see what's going on and then intervene the way that he did. There's one more statue which has a really interesting line in it. Let me quote it if I can find it.
Now, in your thought, do you think Moses at all had some kind of claim to the royal throne? Like, let's say Moses III would have died or something along those lines. Would he have ended up being Pharaoh?
I don't think so, because he wasn't in the bloodline. And even though it seems like they attempted to make him as quasi-divine as possible with the titles and whatnot, like, he wasn't able to depict his parents or anything like that. And this is the cycle of the gods where you depict your family and you're within this whole unit. So I don't think even Hatshepsut would have been able to do that. But I think even the mere thought of it is why this damnatio memoriae happened. You probably had these later pharaohs believing that there was going to be some kind of usurpation of the throne. So I could very, very well see that as happening. There's one inscription here which says the following: "The steward Senmut it is who has come forth from the flood, and to whom has been given the inundation, that he may control it, even the Nile." It's a really interesting line. And it's like, is that kind of keying in on Senenmut coming from the Nile? Like, the steward Senmut it is who has come forth from the flood, even the Nile. So possibly there's even a link there of being
He came out
drawn
of the
from
Nile.
the
Yeah.
water.
Wow.
So I would say in all this, the parallels are so incredible. Whether you take high chronology and put it within that framework, or you take low chronology within a Septuagint framework, in which you basically end up with a similar train of events just several decades later.
So
I would
one
say
thing
the main.
I wanted to
Go-
ask about his parents.
Mhm.
One of the things again that I've heard against the argument of being Moses is that his parents were said to have been outsiders or something, or not from that region. But in my mind, even if Moses, was elevated, they probably would have lied about, where they were from or who they were,
Right.
just to hide his I mean, because they lie about a lot of negative things, like when they
Right.
go to war, they don't add their losses and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
why would they mention them being Hebrew, in their burials? And also, I think you said in one of your interviews that the remains of Moses's parents are actually here in America.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't
Or
mention that. I'm not sure as to where the location of them
okay,
uh, are. Um, but yeah, as far as the parents go, so it was a common thing to take on Egyptian names. So this was the next point I was going to make as to one of the big questions is, if this is Moses, why isn't he just called Moses? So, but yeah, the same would apply to his parents. But what we do have well established is that Egyptian names were adopted by Semitic people within Egypt. This is extremely common that you have this going on. There's a quote here I want to read from Roerig et al. These Egyptologists that they wrote what they wrote about Senenmut. And they say, just talking about this point in general, indeed, there is much we do not know about population groups in Egypt. 3 women from the Levant were taken into the harem of Thutmose III. Their ethnic identity would not have been learned had their West Semitic names not been written on their funerary goods. Like, that's the only way, because in the case of these particular women, we actually do find these West Semitic names inscribed on these certain things. However, they continue, immigrants often took Egyptian names, or their names were not recorded at all, leaving us only their bodies, possessions, and possibly grave types to tell their stories. What are we to make, for instance, for the woman with braided hair buried quite simply in the tomb of Senenmut's parents? And then they also say that 2 rectangular coffins contain 6 additional mummies, all anonymous and almost certainly close family members. So it's like, and that kind of points to his upbringing as a nobody in the land, like these anonymous burials. So that would be my answer, is that you have people in any case taking on Egyptian names, and you wouldn't even know otherwise if they are from the Levant, say, as in the case of these others. So as far as Senenmut's name himself, so like the answer to all this would just be if you could find like some kind of text saying Senenmut is Moses.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
You're not gonna find that.
But, yeah. But what's really interesting is that some of the earliest classical accounts of the Exodus. So the earliest Egyptian accounts of the Exodus, you have Manetho from the 3rd century BC, and you have Heremon from, I believe it's the 1st century BC. Both of these individuals say that Moses was called a different name in Egypt, and that the name Moses was only used by the Israelites and among the Israelites. So if we are to take them at face value, which they're writing over 2,000 years ago, much closer to the time period at hand, and as Egyptians, they have access to some of these documents and whatnot. So if we take them seriously, that Moses was actually being referred to by another name, and they have conflicting names who they think was this title for Moses. That's besides the point. He was being referred to by a different name by the Egyptians, Moses by the Israelites. That would mean if we're going to look for Moses in Egypt, we should look for him by a different name among the Egyptians. So I would say that that would be my answer to Senenmut and the use of that name, rather than Moses among the Egyptians.
So who banished Moses? Was it Thutmose the first?
I would say Thutmose the third. So this is 1486. We are well within the reign now of Thutmose the third.
So about how old would he be?
So this would still be a young Thutmose. This is, I think he would be early 20s by this point of time. So not yet quite at the end of the co-regency, but enough to wield the power, basically.
And Moses would be about 40 years old, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So during the time of Thutmose III is, I think, the perfect fit with the Pharaoh of the oppression. I mean, you have a century of slavery, so you could call all of them all the pharaohs during that time, oppression pharaohs. But I think like the key Pharaoh of the oppression, when you read Exodus 2, Exodus 3, you read about Moses fleeing, and then there's that little bit at the end of the chapter where it talks about the Israelites crying out for the bondage. And then how it was a long period of time that passed while Moses was in Midian before the Pharaoh died. So this fits really well with Thutmose III because he is one of the longest reigning pharaohs. If you include the co-regency, 54 years. If you exclude it, just over 30 years. One of the longest reigning pharaohs. And so it fits well with this block of time taken up while Moses is in Midian. And then you have that Pharaoh dying, Moses coming back from Midian. So I think
because Thutmose the third is known as being one of the most powerful pharaohs that ever ruled, right?
Arguably
greatly expanded military and everything.
Yep. If not the most, then like top 2, top 3. He's like right up there. He's known as the Napoleon of Egypt. He expanded the empire to its greatest extent, campaigned heavily right up into the Levant. So yeah, extremely powerful pharaoh. So that alone fitting well with him being the oppression pharaoh. I think also the length of his reign fitting with much of the length of time Moses was in Midian until the Pharaoh died. And then at that point, you have things starting to go in motion for Moses to start coming back into Egypt and the Pharaoh's court.
So from my understanding, I don't know how true it is, but since Thutmose III was so young, they had Hatshepsut sent him off to be trained in the military. So she was kind of pretty much in charge of everything. And Thutmose III kind of resented her for that, right?
Yeah. So again, we get into debates here, and this gets into also damnatio memoriae and who is responsible for excising these names of Hatshepsut and Senenmut. Some early theories held that Thutmose III was responsible for that, for some kind of animosity for his mother and what she was doing. I think the more likely is Amenhotep II, Thutmose III's son, and what Thutmose III's relationship with Hatshepsut wasn't as much on the rocks as that, but I could see some threat there in Thutmose III's mind towards Senenmut, if indeed Senenmut is Moses. I could see some animosity there, some potential threat of him getting too high in power. And then as Hatshepsut's on the way out, Thutmose III is trying to establish himself and kind of put his own people into power.
So you after the 40 years in Midian, and he went back to Egypt. What Amenhotep II was ruling?
Yeah, so at that time you have so you have a short co-regency. Again, all of this debated, like, was there a co-regency? How long? I think there was a short co-regency beginning in 1453 with Thutmose III and Amenhotep II, and then Amenhotep II beginning sole reign following his father's death at 1451, 1450.
Is it
So
possible
you
that
have
he?
Amenhotep III, at least starting his sole rule then. And he gets off with a bang, like the start of his reign, as far as invasions into Canaan, incredible cruelty. Like, it's not just people trying to tie him to the Exodus that capitalize on that. It's like a lot of scholars out there. Great one, Peter de Manuelian, he wrote an authoritative text in the 1980s on Amenhotep II. And he talks about Amenhotep II taking cruelty to new heights. And you read about some of the deeds that he was doing in some of his campaigns. He's capturing these foreign kings. He's hacking off their limbs and hanging them upside down from his boat as he sails back to Egypt. He's digging these mass pits in the ground, filling them full of captives, and then setting them on fire alive. Like, crazy stories of cruelty, incredible feats of strength as well. Amenhotep II was like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the pharaonic world. He's like this larger than life athlete, charioteer, which is interesting in light of the chariotry talked about in the Exodus account. He's an expert bowman. So he had everything going for him as far as his power, as far as the start he got off to in life. He has about 3 campaigns into the Levant, 2 or 3, depending on who you talk to, up till his year 9 of his reign. And then it sort of all stops. And it depends on whom you talk to as to how long he reigned for. Was his reign in the 20s or 30s of years? I think 26 years or 32 years. But it's like from year 9 onwards, it's like we hit a void, and it's like this empty spot within his reign, and we have very little attested. Compared to those first years, it seems like something happens and things are kind of thrown awry. We do have, I think it's from year 23 of his reign, something that appears called the Semna Stela of Usersetet, which is a big stela that was found in northern Sudan. And it belonged to his viceroy of Nubia called Usersetet. And evidently there was some kind of a text document that Amenhotep II sent to Usersetet that really impressed Usersetet, and he had it engraved on this big stone. So it's become known as the Semna Stela. And this inscription talks about, he tells his viceroy in Nubia, beware of foreigners, beware of magicians, and he talks about the useless people that are from the Levant. So it's like you pick up kind of these sentiments that fit really remarkably with some kind of event going on that I think within this period fits best with the Exodus and the chain of events going on with the Exodus. And I think what helps to confirm that is the progression from Amenhotep II all the way to Akhenaten. But we can go into that if you like.
Now, Amenhotep II, he wasn't a firstborn son, and the what's called the ruler before him ruled for 40 years. They said that that's two of the connections that you can make. They kind of zero it down that he was probably the Pharaoh. Are there any other connections of why he might be the Pharaoh?
Yeah, so one really key connection, I think, is those earliest Egyptian accounts of the Exodus. Again, they come from later and they're sorely biased. Any Egyptian would be writing about this history. But we have Manetho on the scene in the 3rd century BC, Ptolemaic priest, and he is the earliest, I believe he's the earliest author to mention the name of the Exodus Pharaoh. Definitely the earliest Egyptian author to mention the name of the Exodus Pharaoh. And he calls him Amenhotep, which is the Ptolemaic Greek form of Amenhotep. So he calls
so
the
this guy
Exodus
he's referring to him as the Pharaoh of the Exodus himself.
Yes.
Wow.
And he mentions Moses as having a different name, but then becoming known as Moses to the Israelites. And he calls the Exodus Pharaoh Amenhotep or
I know
Amenhotep,
you mentioned it before. What was his name? This Greek historian?
Manetho.
Manetho.
And then the next Egyptian historian, which is Herimon, who is writing, I believe it's the 1st century. I think with him there's some debate as to the exact time. I believe it's the 1st century BC. He gives the same name for the Exodus Pharaoh, Amenhotep. So it's like these two earliest Egyptian writers who have their own corpus that they're drawing from for their accounts are both united in calling the Pharaoh of the Exodus Amenhotep or Amenhotep. So, okay, if we're to believe them that it's Amenhotep, then we have some choices. We have 4 pharaohs called Amenhotep. We have Amenhotep I, which comes soon after Ahmose I. No one really posits him as being the Pharaoh of the Exodus. We have Amenhotep II, which is the key Amenhotep, probably the most famous Amenhotep associated with the Exodus. We have Amenhotep III. There are some people that hold to this. He's on the scene in the High Chronology, end of the 15th century, Low Chronology, start of the 14th. There's some crossover there. And then you have Amenhotep IV, who changed his name to Akhenaten. So you have 4 pharaohs within a relatively short frame of time from the late 16th century to the early mid 14th century, in which we have our Amenhotep pharaohs. And so I certainly believe Amenhotep II, based on the flow of events, is the right Amenhotep. And most people who believe it's an Amenhotep and who dismiss these later historians as well, not knowing what they were talking about, or these names being interpolated by others or whatever, all excuses in my mind. I think that best fits with Amenhotep II as being the Pharaoh of the Exodus. So no, he's not named in...
I'm sorry, but what's the name of Manetho's body of work where he mentions this?
Historiae Egyptiaca, I believe. Just a second. I can give you... Yeah, Egyptiaca is the name of it.
And what about the other historian?
Sorry, no, Egyptiaca, that's it. I was looking at something else. Yeah.
And the other historian?
So his work...
The other historian, what about his body of work?
His work is lost as far as like original text from him. We only know about it where it's quoted, and it's quoted at length in other sources, mainly by Josephus. So most of what we know about Manetho's work is known from these huge block quotes by Josephus. And what's interesting is some people try and say, well, you know, some people may have changed stuff in Josephus's quotes or whatever, or Josephus may have changed stuff. What's interesting is Josephus actually disagrees with a lot of what Manetho is writing, but he's like very particular about quoting what Manetho says, and he repeatedly uses this terminology, like, here I will quote expressly from Manetho himself, as if he was here for a witness, and he gives these block quotes. and he disagrees in many parts. Like if we're talking about chopping and changing things, we're getting into a lot of speculation to try and work personal theories in. So as far as these earliest mentions, Egyptian mentions of the name of the Exodus pharaoh, we've got like quite a united front here between Manetho and Heremon as both jointly saying, this is who it is, Amenhotep. And then, okay, we can debate which Amenhotep. I think Amenhotep II best fits all the parameters. Like you say, I neglected to mention, he's not a firstborn. His son who succeeded after him is not a firstborn and came to power in very unusual circumstances. And then you have the flow on to Amenhotep III and Akhenaten.
Now, his son is actually Amenhotep the third is actually the one that he made up the story about clearing the dust off the Sphinx's feet to get claim for the throne.
Yep, the dream stealer. So this is basically an excuse that he provides as to why he should be king, and the inference being that he was not the heir apparent. There's some debate as to who exactly was the heir apparent. If it was another prince called Amenhotep, another Amenhotep, or if it was someone called Webensenu. There's some debate about that. But what there isn't debate about is that Thutmose IV was not in line for the throne, and that for some reason he felt the need to justify himself.
Do we have any kind of record of what the military was like during his reign?
Thutmose IV?
The third, the one that took over after, that wasn't the firstborn son, that cleared off the Sphinx and made the stela. Well, do we have any idea or evidence of the state of the military? Because if it's severely deteriorated, if it's like half of the military they should have, there should be some kind of connection there.
Yeah, I don't believe there are any known campaigns of Thutmose IV.
Thutmose IV. I mean, Thutmose the first.
Yeah, he was the non-firstborn successor of Amenhotep II.
Okay.
So he reigned for 9 years, second half of the 15th century. Yeah, I don't believe, I could be corrected on that, but I don't believe there's any campaigns. I believe you have the last, no, this is it, sorry, not into Canaan. So that basically any campaigns that happen following Amenhotep II are south, down into Nubia or Ethiopia. That's the case for Amenhotep III. So on into end of 15th century, start of the 14th century, and then on into the time of Akhenaten. So it's like from Thutmose III, the oppression pharaoh, into the start of Amenhotep II's reign, you have these constant campaigns into Canaan, ferocious campaigns into Canaan, and then it just stops. And any campaigns that do happen down south. And it's like Canaan is off limits for a while there, for a good while.
So is there any possibility that Amenhotep II and Moses knew each other? Or when Moses showed up, or why when Moses showed up at the scene, why wasn't he just killed?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think they would have known each other. If Moses is one and the same as Senenmut, I think that for Moses to have been such a high-ranking official, there would have been knowledge of them, whether or not he was of him, whether or not he was Senenmut. Yeah, and that being one of the threats about what would happen if Moses came back on the scene. So, yeah, it's a good question. Why was he not just killed? I mean, in the biblical account, God has a purpose, and so God's
besides God protecting him,
it'd be a short story.
I know the Pharaoh kept letting him back in the court to test him, and to me, that shows that maybe they knew each other. There might have been some kind of fondness there as well. You never know. Maybe he helped raise them as a kid or something.
Yeah, I don't think there would have been fondness, but I think there was just toying with one another. Like you've got the account of the magicians going back and forth with Moses, making a mockery of him. And I mean, if you look at the account, it's almost the Israelites that are more willing to kill him, because Moses is doing this in the Pharaoh's court, and Pharaoh's only making the job harder for the Israelites. Because Moses is there trying to get them out, and he sends out the order to increase the workload on the Israelites. So yeah, it's a good question.
Also, did the Pharaoh drown with his army?
Okay, so this is a controversial question. I could go either way on this, and it gets down to chronology, and it depends who you talk to. Most chronological reconstructions which feature Amenhotep II as the Pharaoh of the Exodus have the Exodus happening within that first third of his reign. And I can see reason for doing so. Like if you have this long block of Thutmose III's reign, and then he dies, the inference is kind of that Moses comes back from Midian following that death in the near future, like maybe within that first decade of Amenhotep II's rule, in which case you would have the Exodus happening during the first part of Amenhotep II's reign. But you do have this tendency to want to put the Exodus at the end of the respective Pharaoh's reign, and to have it resulting in the Pharaoh's drowning in the Red Sea. The text doesn't mandate that, basically. You could get the sense from it and make a case for it, but I don't think the text mandates it. Dr. Douglas Petrovic does a good job of explaining this. Really, the key verse that everyone inevitably turns to is in the Psalms. I forget which psalm it is off the top of my head, but it talks about Pharaoh being overthrown, Pharaoh and his host being overthrown in the sea. So, but then the word overthrown is also applied elsewhere to David, and David didn't die at this certain point in time. So it could just refer to Pharaoh, like his forces as being overthrown, and his power and his prowess being overthrown, and not necessarily, like the scripture doesn't say Pharaoh died in the Red Sea. It doesn't say that. So it could be just that sense of him being overthrown, as David in this other set of circumstances was also overthrown. There are different chronological schemes proposed. I don't know if I've got the book here, by an author called Lapin, and I forget, they're co-authors. Right here. They just came out with a new edition of this book. This is their third edition. This is Thutmose IV as Exodus Pharaoh. So they try and make the case for Thutmose IV, which I don't agree with. And I would say is a more minor position, like Amenhotep II being the more major one. They do propose an alternate scheme so they are playing with chronologies a bit. They find a plausible scheme in which 1446 aligns with the death of Amenhotep II. And so they allow that with Amenhotep II as Pharaoh of the Exodus, possibly he could have died in the Red Sea, if we take their chronological shift that they do. Basically, what they hold to is an ultra high chronology. So I like the high chronology, and and so theirs is more like, you could call it an ultra high chronology. So there is that possibility.
And high chronology, that's a later date, right?
That's an earlier date. So the higher chronologies are the earlier ones, the lower chronologies are the lower ones. So there are different schemes you can propose. Like on a low chronology with the Septuagint, 440 years for 1 Kings 6 verse 1 versus 480 years. This would put the Exodus at 1406 and the conquest at 1366. It would shift everything down 40 years. And on this scheme, it actually lines up with closer to the end of Amenhotep II's reign on a low chronology. So you have people who like to pick and choose and who prefer different things. But it's still an open question as to the chronology, as to where it would have fit. Amenhotep II's body is generally believed to have been found. So this is one of the points against his body being washed and buried at the bottom of the Red Sea. There is some level of debate as to whether it is him, but more likely than not, it is him. What's interesting about this mummy is that his body is riddled with these tubercles, these sores, these like lesions all over him.
Oh wow! Like the boils and lesions from the plagues.
Yeah. Oh,
wow.
Here's another quote. I'll see if I can bring up. So his body was studied in 1907 by Grafton Elliott Smith, who studied a lot of these pharaohs. It's written up by him in A Note on the Mummies in the Tomb of Amenhotep II at Biban el-Muluk in 1907. He says, quote, "The skin over the whole body of Amenhotep II is thickly studded with small projections or tubercles from 2 millimeters to 8 millimeters in diameter. At present, I am unable to determine whether they are the results of some disease or merely the effects of the embalmer's salt bath, but they are certainly unusual." So it seems unlikely that it would be the embalming, and I think others have come along after the fact and said that as well. Like, if this is the process of embalming, why don't we see it on all these others? So it seems pretty plausible that this is the diseased body of the Pharaoh of the Exodus from the plagues. And you can look up pictures of it, of the mummy, which is another...
Do we know how his firstborn son died?
How Amenhotep II's firstborn son died?
Yeah.
No, we know he died. His firstborn son didn't succeed him. We know that much. Yeah. We don't know how the son died. I mean, apart from the biblical account, as far as archaeologically and historically, we don't know that. And there, again, there's some debate as to which was this firstborn son. There's a camp that really identifies Weben Senu, who was a young boy interred with his father in this tomb. Joel Kramer of Expedition Bible, he's got a fairly recent video on it. Pretty interesting video. And then there is another possible firstborn son, again called Amenhotep, who predeceased him. So it's a debate. Was it this guy? Was it the other guy? Whatever the case, we know it wasn't Thutmose IV who did end up succeeding him.
So I actually got a question that was asked by someone from my Facebook that wanted me to ask you. Now, basically, the biblical accounts say that the devil fought over Moses' body or something like that. Do we have any kind of idea that might point to where he's buried?
I would say no. No, that there are people with ideas as to where he's buried. Somewhere east of the Jordan. It's the book of Jude that talks about the war over Moses's body. But yeah, no, we don't. And that plays into Senenmut as well. We don't know where Senenmut is, if indeed this is Moses. And maybe it's not Moses. We'll see. We'll see how things play out, and people debate about these things. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We can only look at these things and speculate, but it's fun to speculate. But yeah, Jude 1 verse 9. Well, it's a single chapter book. So Jude verse 9. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring. Okay, and then it goes into some other detail there. So you have Michael and the devil contending over the burial location. There are different traditions as to where Moses is buried. I believe there's a traditional Muslim grave site on this side of the Jordan. So I'm in Jerusalem right now. So you go out toward the Dead Sea and you see the grave of Moses. It's like, well, he didn't make it this far across. So he obviously died on the other side. So I don't know if they try and say that somehow his body made its way across. In any case, I would say somewhere east of the Jordan River, in one of the many caves or areas like that of Jordan.
So I don't want to hold you up too much longer, but this question might be a bag of worms. I don't know, but do we know where the Red Sea crossing is and where Mount Sinai is?
I am a proponent of the Gulf of Suez as being the Red Sea crossing site and the traditional site of Mount Sinai, Jebel Musa. I've got a couple of articles on our website, Armstrong.
Now is that in the Sinai Peninsula?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The traditional site down in the bottom triangle there. There's a lot of passionately held ideas and beliefs about different sites, i.e. being the Gulf of Suez on the west side of the Sinai, Gulf of Aqaba on the east side, or the Bitter Lakes theory right up north along that west side, still the west side of the Sinai. I like the traditional theory, like going way back, that it was just across the northern tip, the very northernmost tip of the Gulf of Suez. A common, more minimalist idea, I would say, is the Bitter Lakes theory, even further up, that it was these shallow marshes or lakes, and that some kind of natural wind event pushed the water aside, and the Israelites walked through. I think the description in the Song of the Sea precludes that. Like, it talks about the abyss and the depths. But I wouldn't go to the other extreme of the Gulf of Aqaba personally. I think that is just too much of a Grand Canyon. Like, and I'm totally not one for diminishing miracles or anything like that. But I don't think the Egyptians would have survived going down there in chariots, let alone having to have the water crash in on top of them. I think the Gulf of Suez, long traditionally believed as the site, the northern end fits perfectly. If I recall, it's almost dead flat all the way across. Like Josephus talks about the crossing being like a road or a wilderness. Like it's shallow enough. What's the depth? 40 feet, maybe 40 feet. Like impressive, crazy impressive, miracle, 100%. But it's not like descending at least 600, 700 meters below sea level. The same, like the Burj Khalifa, the tallest sky tower, that would be the center point of the Gulf of Aqaba. At the center point of the crossing there, the proposed crossing site. So you imagine walls of water, the height of the Burj Khalifa. So I don't think that quite fits.
I personally do think it was in the Gulf of Aqaba through
Okay.
that little land bridge that they have, because there is a little land bridge that isn't that deep. But then again, you know, that's not neither here nor there. That's not what we're here to talk about.
These are all interesting theories, and we'll see who's right in the end. Like,
hey, and you know what? I was about to comment that I really like about you is that, you know, you've actually reading the books of people with contrary views, and you're not bashing them. a lot of people are like, "Oh no, this guy's crazy."
Yeah.
Don't ever listen to him. You don't know what
Yeah.
he's talking about. You know?
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
I
And
appreciate
yeah,
it.
well, at the end of the
Thanks.
day, when we're all gone and we're talking to Jesus, he can let us know. So I wanted to ask, what are you currently doing, and how can people get a hold of you, or
Okay.
see your work?
We are based in Jerusalem, the Armstrong Institute here. In Jerusalem, we have an institute here. We have a website, armstronginstitute.org. We publish popular format articles there. We have a bi-monthly magazine. It's free of charge. You can go to the website and sign up there. It comes out every 2 months, bi-monthly, 40 pages, full color. Get it. Like, there's no reason not to. It's free of charge. Um,
Is it digital or it comes in the mail?
it comes in the mail. Like, it's a quality magazine. I don't think I've got one on or around me right now. Our latest one just went to print. Beautiful magazine. So definitely get that, subscribe to that. We are regularly excavating here in Jerusalem. So we just wrapped up an excavate, well, not just, it was in the summer. We actually wrapped up 3 excavations over a year-long period here in Jerusalem. So if anyone's familiar with it, you have the Temple Mount complex, and then south of that, you've got the city of David. And then we regularly excavate on the Ophel. This is between the Temple Mount and the city of David, kind of like the rise that goes up.
Ophel Gardens.
Yeah, the Davidson Park, Ophel Park area, gardens area. We excavate on the eastern side, which has been called by Israel Antiquities Authorities officials the most important site in all Israel. So I'll stand by that. But we have really impressive remains from the time period of Solomon onwards. So this is the Iron Age. What we've been talking about today is all Bronze Age period. Really fun, interesting period. More of what we do, though, is excavating the Iron Age and some of the amazing discoveries from the time of the biblical kingdom of Judah here. We also offer tours of the area of the Ophel and city of David. So if anyone's interested in that, we have a tour tab on the website. People can get in touch that way. And we've got an excavation blog, that kind of thing as well. So people can stay tuned as to what we're doing. So yeah, very busy. We've just finished several excavations. We're working with Hebrew University to publish those excavations. So the excavations are the fun bit, digging in the dirt, discovering artifacts, but then the
Tedious
hard
though, right?
labor, yeah. So then the hard labor happens in studying the finds, processing the finds, publishing the finds, ultimately publishing these kinds of large volumes here about the excavations. So you can see here the Temple Mount. We excavate down here along the eastern side. City of David is down below here. And big, thick books of publications of the discoveries, all of that jazz. So mostly relating to the biblical kingdom period, time of King Solomon through to the time of Zedekiah and on beyond, the later periods that we dig through as well. So
Wow, man, this has been a very informative time. I've really loved this whole interview. Maybe you can come on some other time and talk a little bit about the Jerusalem stuff.
sure, sounds good.
Possible.
Yeah.
But can you still do us a favor and pray us out?
Sure. Father in heaven, we thank you very much for this interview that you've given us. Please help it to be productive and helpful to people. Thank you for Sergio and this chance to have this discussion with him. Please bless him and his channel, his efforts, help it to bring forth good fruit. We thank you for the chance to be a part of these discoveries and these activities. And we ask for your blessings on all of it going forward. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks again, Christopher. And for you guys watching, we'll see you again next time for another episode of Grotto in the Tar Pit.
Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto.
Hey, thanks